All right, guys, we're back for another edition of Plus Money Picks. This one's going to be for Makhachev versus Moises. It's UFC Vegas 31. I am coming off of one of my best nights of betting. At UFC 264, I cashed 4 different parlays. One of them was a zero point 0.8 unit parlay that made me 18 units, and it actually would have been more if the Ahmedovsky fight would have held into it. That would have made it an 8-leg parlay versus 7. So the multiplier would have even been more intense. And on top of that, even outside of that big parlay, had a 12-unit profit going anyway. Just an amazing night of betting on a card that I was expecting to possibly lose money. So feeling really excited and confident going into this one. So this whole card, Makhachev versus Moises, the only issue that I'm having is I'm not really seeing a whole lot of underdogs that I like in this card. So I might have to, go a little prop heavy, set up some parlays. And since I've been kind of on a run, I decided that if you guys want to follow me on Bet MMA, I'm going to start a profile that is called Plus Money Picks. And I'll just have like a small subscription fee if you want to have some insight onto how I'm setting up my bets, especially in a card like this where it's not going to just be, I'm not going to do a whole lot of just straight picks because of how the odds are. So the first fight of the card, we have Rodrigo Nocimento versus Alan Badou. It seems like a low-level heavyweight fight, but honestly, when I was watching Nocimento, I was kind of impressed with what he has going for himself. Both guys have decent looking records from the outside. Rodrigo Nocimento 8-1, his one loss coming recently against Chris Daukaus, and then Alan Badou, he is 8-2. Both of those 2 losses coming to UFC competition. One was Tom Aspinall, and one was a heavyweight Dalcha Longambula. So at least they're good losses, but then when you look at Alan Badou's wins, he does seem to be a bit of a can crusher. And it just doesn't look very good that both of his losses are KO losses to UFC guys. Aspinall got this guy down quickly. He didn't really show anything that great in his first UFC fight. But then when I was looking at Nocimento, so he has a win over Don'Tale Mayes in the UFC, which, Don'Tale Mayes isn't the most impressive guy, but he is at least a decent heavyweight. Someone that holds a little bit of weight in beating them. He subbed him. I don't think there's any shame in losing to Chris Daukaus. And then outside of that, when I'm looking at Nocimento, he's going to be the younger guy. I think he has better striking and grappling, honestly. And he's 100% finish rate. I think looking at how Badou has lost only by finish, it's what you like to see. And I just like that he has the ability to sub him or knock him out. So my pick in this one is going to be Rodrigo Nocimento. Currently, Nocimento, looking at the line, he is minus 345 and Badou is plus 285. So there's not a whole lot of value in betting him straight. Probably wouldn't recommend that. But I'm going to just kind of sprinkle him in parlays. And then once I see full odds on maybe like a round 1 prop, that might be how I lean for Rodrigo Nocimento. So going into the next fight on the card, we have Francisco Figareto versus Malcolm Gordon. Malcolm Gordon, definitely not someone that really impresses me that much. Francisco Figareto, the brother of Davison Figueiredo, obviously, and they do have a fairly similar fighting style. Gordon, one of the reasons that I'm just definitely not taking this guy in this fight is, so he's got 2 UFC fights so far, has landed 3 significant strikes total in all of his fights. All of his losses are by finish, 4 knockout losses, 1 submission loss. All of the UFC opposition that he's faced is pretty much just cut through him like butter. Hasn't offered much resistance. The only thing that I guess he kind of has going for him is Malcolm Gordon's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. Looking at Figareto, he's got 7 wins by sub, 3 by knockout, so he's got multiple ways that he could finish Gordon in this one. It's 10 finished wins out of his 12 wins, fairly impressive. Figueiredo is much more refined in his striking and grappling, I believe. Just good takedown game. I think neither one of these guys would look great if it went to decision, so who knows with who to gas and kind of just give up at the end if it goes long. But I think there's a decent chance that Figareto pulls this off. There's a really good chance, and most likely by finish, and most likely in the early rounds. Right now, Figareto is minus 315, and Malcolm Gordon is coming back at plus 265. So again, I would kind of just lean towards putting Figareto in some smaller parlays or something. Not a ton of value in betting him straight. Let's see. Next on the card, we have Miles Johns and Anderson dos Santos. So Anderson dos Santos, 21-8. Miles Johns is 11-1. That one loss came by a pretty brutal, just flying knee kind of out of nowhere against Bautista. Other than that, Miles Johns, he's going to be the much younger fighter in this one. I think he's definitely higher volume and better defensively with takedowns and striking. He's got a 68% striking defense and an 87% takedown defense, which are both really good numbers. His significant strikes, he lands 3.33 per minute and absorbs 2.42, so you like to see that. I think, so one of the people that really pieced up Anderson dos Santos was Andre Ewell, and he just way outstruck him. And I think Miles Johns is someone that throws a bit harder than Andre Ewell. Andre Ewell is kind of always looking to decision you. He's just trying to volume and impress the judges with landing a lot of strikes. Anderson dos Santos, the only thing that looks kind of good for him is that, he's got 12 submission wins, so that's obviously an impressive feat. And he's got a 4-inch reach advantage in this one, which might kind of help him, but you're looking at his stats. He's got a 28% striking accuracy, which is not great. He has only an 18% takedown accuracy, which comes from him just kind of spamming takedowns and kind of being desperate to get that. As far as striking numbers, lands 2.66 significant strikes per minute while absorbing 4.8. Just a terrible stat line, and someone that's pretty clean on the feet like Miles Johns is just not what you want to see. Anderson dos Santos in that Ewell fight that I mentioned, he got 10-8'd on the feet, which is a pretty difficult thing to happen. So I see Miles Johns just way out edging him, probably trying to keep it on the feet. And just at this weight, both these guys tend to kind of be, Miles Johns tends to be more of a decision fighter, but I could see Johns knocking him out in this one. And then dos Santos, really his only way to win this would be just by fishing for a sub. I just don't see that as being likely because Johns hasn't been submitted in his career. This is one of the closer line fights. Miles Johns is minus 172 and Anderson dos Santos is plus 147. So this might be like one of the few opportunities that you have to just do a straight pick and get decent odds. But I would also kind of sprinkle Johns into parlays just to kind of boost the odds a bit. So the next one that we're going to look at is Taha versus Sergey Morozov. Morozov, he's one of these guys that it's hard to get a good read on because he wasn't always fighting in the UFC. He was a M1 guy, I believe. And I was able to see some of his fights from M1. It's hard to kind of get a read on his one UFC fight because it was against, I believe it's Umar Nurmagomedov. And Nurmagomedov just looked very clean, had great takedowns, and still also had a very good striking game in that fight. And Morozov didn't really have a whole lot of an answer for anything in that one. Taha is someone that he's pretty quick with his striking. I was honestly pretty impressed with some of his striking. He doesn't exactly have the best stats or anything, but I think he definitely should have the edge in this one. He's 13-3. Sergey Morozov coming back at 16-4. Morozov, he was a former M1 champ, I believe. Looking at his record real quick. But honestly, I believe he actually did capture the M1 title at one point, but that doesn't really mean all that much to me because I think even like Nate Landwehr or someone like that was a M1 champ, and that, I mean, hasn't done that much in the UFC. So looking deeper into this one, as far as how they match up, I think their height and reach was fairly similar. Yeah, it's actually going to be Taha with a 2-inch reach advantage in this one. So I like to see that. But Morozov, 11 of his 16 wins by finish, 8 were by knockout. I think he's the one that would be more likely to go for a takedown in this one. He does show some submission wins in his career, but they were mostly early. So things that kind of got me a little nervous about Taha, 35% striking accuracy and 43% striking defense. But he just likes to throw bombs, so I think some of that kind of comes with it. He has missed weight before, don't really like to see that, but it just comes with the fact that he's pretty big for 135. But yeah, when I was watching how their fights have gone recently, I just like that Taha, he throws more combinations. He just looks a lot faster on the feet. I don't see Morozov having such advanced grappling that he should be able to dominate Taha in that way. And again, this is one of the more closely lined fights. It's actually been closing a bit. Taha is all the way down to minus 163 and Morozov's plus 143. So it's not my most confident pick to be taking Taha in this one, but the more I looked into it, I feel like Khalid Taha is actually a pretty decent fighter, and Morozov just didn't really show me all that much. One of his losses was Josh Reddinghouse, which is a guy that's on the Ultimate Fighter right now, I believe. So it just kind of shows where they're at. So yeah, we'll just move on to the next fight. In the next fight on UFC Vegas 31, we have Amanda Lamosh versus Montserrat Ruiz. And Montserrat Ruiz, I actually did bet her against Cheyenne Bays, which everyone was kind of all up on Bays because I think Ruiz was even like a last-minute replacement. That was just because I thought, Ruiz had a decent chance of dominating Cheyenne Bays on the ground. I thought she could just kind of hold her down, which is exactly what happened. It's just I don't see that as a path to victory for her in this fight. Amanda Lemos, she's someone that after I was watching tape on her again, I was really impressed by her. I remembered watching some of her recent fights and thinking that she looked really good, and then rewatching the tape. I mean, she's really impressive. She's 9-1-1, and her one loss wasn't even at 115. I think it was all the way up at 135. Amanda Lemos, just someone that's very powerful in the feet. She can grapple you too. She's got some submission wins. I think she's just got an overall power advantage. I don't see Ruiz's honestly kind of low level takedown. She goes a lot for like these like headlock and head and arm kind of takedowns. And I think Lemos, even if she kind of gets taken to the ground with it, I think she would find a way to even end up on the back of Ruiz. And then if it stays on the feet, I mean, Lemos should be able to just destroy this girl because Lemos will have a 4-inch reach advantage. Like I said, she's got a lot more power than Ruiz. And Ruiz she doesn't have much of a reach and she doesn't have much of a striking defense. So I think she'll just get pieced up if this is on the feet. And it honestly has a pretty decent chance of ending early. I do see Amanda Lemos just dominating this girl. And I think that it's either going to lead to Ruiz just being done at the end and kind of giving up a finish, or Lemos just won't let this go to the ground and it could end up just being a domination in round one, and she puts her out. Amanda Lemos, because of, a lot of people are seeing what I'm seeing. So Amanda Lemos, she's all the way up to minus 500. Montserrat Ruiz is plus 375. So it's a pretty obvious one in this one, and I actually do feel pretty good about putting Lemos in a lot of parlays this week. Then next, let's see. Next we have Daniel Rodriguez. He's getting a last minute replacement in Preston Parsons. Preston Parsons, he's regional scene guy so far. He's 9-2, which is a decent record. The fact is about Daniel Rodriguez versus Parsons, though, is I would bet Daniel Rodriguez just about pretty much against anyone that, especially that's not ranked. So someone that's coming in, last minute replacement, coming off the regional scene, I think it's a tall task to be facing Daniel Rodriguez. Parsons already has a loss to Mike Perry on his record, and Daniel Rodriguez handled Mike Perry pretty well. So even on the MMA math side, I think everything's pointing towards Rodriguez, which, I mean, the odds are really starting to swing further and further in his favor. I was seeing minus 265 earlier, and he's just getting closer and closer to minus 300. Preston Parsons more in that plus 250 range. And Preston Parsons, I mean, all sub wins and everything. He can be dangerous on paper. It's just I think Daniel Rodriguez he's just gonna way outstrike him. So pretty easy pick here. And then once they're allowing it, I know on BetOnline it wasn't quite allowing me to start doing parlays, but Daniel Rodriguez would be someone that I'd parlay for this week. So then next on this card we have Billy Q versus Gabriel Benitez. And honestly, this is one where the underdog could be live. But I just feel like I'm siding with all the favorites on this one, which is boring. But if I want to be safe with my money, I'd rather go with most of the favorites on this card. So looking at how these guys match up, Billy Q 15-3, Gabriel Benitez 22-8. Pretty similar age-wise. And then height and reach, again, not too much difference. There has been a little bit of line shifting back and forth, but at this point, Gabriel Benitez is around minus 170, Billy Q plus 150. So if we're looking at stats, Benitez, significant strikes, he lands 4.38 per minute and absorbs 3.26. Pretty decent ratio. For Billy Q, he lands 7.03 per minute and absorbs 4.37. Both these guys, well, Billy Q, not that great striking defense, 42% striking defense. And then for Benitez, on the other side, we have 70% striking defense, which is a pretty solid number. But then he only has a 38% striking accuracy and a 56% takedown defense. So that's not exactly a stat that you like to see on the Benitez side, because I mean, Billy Q's path to victory would be to get Benitez down to the ground, because he can really smother you once he is on top. I just don't think that Billy Q has the most intimidating jiu-jitsu. What I would worry about as someone that's betting on Benitez is that Billy Q will probably have the cardio advantage in this one. But, I mean, at the same time, Billy Q tends to struggle round one. Billy Q just lost to a southpaw like Benitez is, and Benitez has 5 inches more reach than Gavin Tucker. I think Billy Q is really susceptible to body kicks because he has a pretty long torso, and you see in his other fights that he's getting tagged to the body. And then Benitez, I mean, he has 10 submission wins. I don't think he's exactly like a fish out of water in the grappling realm. So yeah, I mean, I'm leaning Benitez, but this would be one of the fights where I would not be surprised if the underdog wins. And then Benitez, because the line is a lot closer than some of these other fights, he is someone that I've kind of sprinkled into smaller parlays just because he kind of helps boost the odds a little bit. And let's see, next fight we have Rodolfo Vieira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. And this was one where when I looked at it at first, I thought for sure I was going to bet against Vieira just because his last fight was so bad, getting beat by Fluffy Hernandez. I mean, he gasses out. Vieira gasses out in literally all of his fights. He gets pieced up on the feet. He's not a very good striker, and he wears damage really badly. I feel like he's always getting cut up or his eyes swelling up. Like he makes it look dangerous that he's going to end up getting like a doctor's stoppage against him or something. So yeah, just doesn't take shots very well, and that is something that I'm kind of worried about for him in this one. Looking at how he matches up with Stoltzfus, yeah, Stoltzfus, he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, but other than that, they're about the same. Not too much difference in age. And then looking at the odds, currently Vieira minus 220, Stoltzfus plus 185. one thing that I think people could notice about Stoltzfus that's valuable is he's never been finished, but he's also only had one UFC fight, so the level of competition isn't exactly stellar. He has 5 submission wins himself. He has 6 decision wins, so I mean he should be able to have the cardio to outlast him on paper. He's an okay grappler, but I would say Vieira for sure has a huge advantage there. And then one thing so I think Dawkins, I mean, definitely the highest level opponent that he's faced. And when he tried to grapple with Stoltzfus, he didn't really go for a whole lot of leg takedowns. He was kind of grappling with him in the upper body. So it was kind of hard to get a read on how well Stoltzfus would do with the takedown game of Vieira. Stoltzfus, he does seem like he has a really strong chin, and he'll just kind of like zombie out. And yeah, I mean, I just haven't seen anything that impressive. People are going to see a finish on his record from Dana White's Contender Series, but then when you look at what happened with that finish, it was just because he slammed a guy and the guy's arm got dislocated. So it's kind of a weird little fluky thing. So I am leaning Vieira. It's just that Vieira is one of these guys that has about 3 minutes of gas in him. He has terrible striking defense, like I mentioned. He actually has a 42% striking defense. But I mean, the fact is he could end a fight after one takedown. That's really all he needs. And yeah, I just think that Vieira is the side on this one once again, which is a bummer because I really thought I would bet against him, but I just don't think Stoltzfus has quite the skills to beat him. So another big favorite that I'll be leaning with on this one. We'll move on into the card, which I think we're all the way up. Oh, yeah, we're at Mateusz Gamrot versus Jeremy Stephens. And again, when I was looking at the names in this matchup, I thought, well, Jeremy Stephens is usually an underdog that I'm down to bet on, but nope. Looking at this one, so Jeremy Stephens, for one thing, is coming up to 155. Mateusz Gamrot, I think there actually is a pretty good argument that he should still be undefeated. And he's actually a solid 155er. Looking at their matchup. So about same height, same reach. Jeremy Stephens, about 5 years older. Don't like to see that. And then Jeremy Stephens, what stands out is that in his last 5, he hasn't won a fight. Whereas Gamrot, 4-1, he took his first loss in the UFC in his debut. So yeah, just looking at Stephens, I don't think he's necessarily going to be able to defend all the takedowns that Gamrot's going to be throwing at him. This just kind of seems like a punishment fight almost for Stephens because he had missed a weight, then he had done the whole thing where he messed up the fight with Drakkar Klose. I think that the UFC could easily be looking at him as someone that they want to fade out. And he's just one of these guys that he gets hit about as much as he lands. And so I just don't like seeing that with this younger, fresher fighter. And then someone that could also like mix in grappling against him. Gamrot, he's a guy that's pretty active once he is on top of you. And I mean, he hasn't been finished. He has a 64% striking defense in his first 2 UFC fights. So I think defensively he's not terrible. I mean, and then even when you're looking at the stats of that fight that he lost, there's a knockdown credited against him, but it kind of seemed like that was just more of a balance thing, to be honest. So I think just with the grappling, Gamrot could probably edge this one out. I do think that it's pretty likely that this just goes to decision. And then once again, if I haven't listed the odds for this one, so Mateusz Gamrot is in the minus 230 range with Jeremy Stephens coming back at about plus 200. And I just really think Gamrot's probably the way to go. So another favorite for me in this one. Gamrot's, I mean, he's kind of like a risky parlay piece in this one, so I wouldn't put him in too many parlays, to be honest. And next, we're all the way to our co-main event, which is Marion Renault versus Miesha Tate. And this one, I mean, it's tough just because we haven't seen Miesha Tate in a while. Marion Renault, is 9-7. Miesha Tate is 18-7. Looking at their age, it's actually, there's a significant age gap. I thought Miesha Tate was a bit older just because, she's someone that has been retired for a while, so I assume she'd be older, but she's not even 35 yet. And then Marion Renault is 44. As far as how they match up, pretty similar height and reach. I don't really worry about that too much. Renault, just like Stevens, on a pretty bad losing skid. They were all decisions, and honestly, they were to decent competition. Marion Renault, someone that's never been finished. Stats that I don't like with her facing Miesha Tate is she has a 50% takedown defense. She's someone that absorbs as much as she lands. And then looking at her UFC record, I saw she's 5-5-1 in the UFC. And outside of her wins against McMahon and Andrade, her UFC wins, her UFC opponents that she's beat are 2-7 in the UFC. And then I even did a little digging because I was surprised that she had submitted Jessica Andrade. And when you look at that, it was just, so Andrade had kind of dropped Marion Renault, and Andrade kind of smelled blood in the water and just jumped on her and wasn't being too smart defensively. And that's what really set up the triangle for Renault. So kind of a weird finish win on her record. Tate, really the one thing that made me hesitant about betting her at first was just that she hasn't fought since 2016. But really, she's someone that had been championship level, and I think she's still probably got, a lot of her skills maintained. She herself doesn't have a great takedown defense, which I don't like to see. She has a 52% takedown defense and then a 50% striking defense. And she tends to be really low volume and gets outlanded herself. She lands 1.93 significant strikes per minute and absorbs 2.71. So definitely not a great ratio there. But then when you see her fight against Holly Holm, she was holding her own. She was definitely kind of losing momentum at different parts in that fight, but it's still a win on her record. So I think even like with how her striking stats look, it's kind of misleading. And then for Tate, Renault hasn't been finished, but then for Tate, she has been finished. It's just that her finished losses are to reasonable competitions. Like it makes sense. Some of her submission losses are to Rousey, of course. So yeah, I think this has a chance to be a very low volume fight just because neither one of these women are very high volume. It's just with the experience and then the fact that she had been championship level, it's hard not to edge Miesha Tate in this one and to go with another favorite. I do like that this is one that you could kind of just bet straight because the line's pretty close on this one. But yeah, I've got to go with Miesha Tate, and then we'll just kind of see how that one plays out. So then we're all the way to our main event, which, you've been seeing that I've been taking all favorites, and obviously this isn't one that I'm going to switch that up. Islam Makhachev, he's kind of in that Khabib territory already where it's just you don't bet against him. Looking at how he matches up with Thiago Moises, their height and reach pretty similar. It's actually Makhachev that'll be older in this one. Moises is still pretty young. He's only 26. And then Makhachev is approaching 30. And right now, the line hasn't even really moved that much. This is pretty much the number I've been seeing for a while. Makhachev is minus 700 and Thiago Moises is plus 450. And yeah, I was kind of thinking at first, just because Moises was so impressive against Alexander Hernandez, or I shouldn't say he was super impressive, because when I rewatched that fight, I really didn't think it was that impressive. And then on top of that, I don't think Alexander Hernandez is this world beater either. So yeah, I thought, well, Thiago Moises kind of got good striking. He's got grappling, so I thought just because of those tools, he might be someone that I would just take like a low chance underdog shot on, but it's almost impossible to bet against Islam Makhachev at this point. He just looks like he will be a champ one day. I kind of don't think that this will end in a finish. I don't think Thiago Moises has ever been finished in his career, so I'm leaning decision in this one. Makhachev, he's not going to do much for your parlays this week, but maybe in some more long shot parlays where you're putting a lot of fights together and it doesn't matter that you're weighing it down with the minus 700, you could put him in there. But I do like Makhachev, of course, in this one, and I'm really leaning decision for him. So that will be all of my bets for UFC Vegas 31. I'm really hoping that it ends up being as profitable as UFC 264 for me. Just a really great night of bets, and then it was a night that got a lot of parlays to hit, which was awesome. And this card's really parlay heavy for me and prop heavy just because I had to take advantage of odds in any way I could. So I'm hoping that it works out the same way. So yeah, just do your research on this one. See if there are any dogs that you like. I'm not seeing a whole lot that are jumping out at me. So yeah, good luck to everyone out there and see you next week.